Willow Creek was once a perfect suburban neighborhood, a peaceful community where everyone knew each other. It was a place where kids played in the streets, families sat outside in the evenings, and everyone felt safe. But something changed. Slowly, one by one, the neighbors began to disappear, leaving behind nothing but empty houses and whispers in the night. The chilling mystery of the vanishing neighbors would soon turn into a nightmare no one could explain. It all started on a cold winter evening. Sarah Miller, a teacher at the local school, had just finished grading papers. She set her mug of hot tea on the kitchen counter and walked to the living room to watch TV. Her cat, Whiskers, was curled up on the couch, and the house was peaceful. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But the next morning, Sarah's neighbors grew worried when they didn't hear the usual sounds of her morning routine. No birds chirped outside her window. No tea kettle whistled. No soft hum of her radio. When they knocked on Sarah's door, no one answered. The door was unlocked, so they stepped inside. The living room was undisturbed, and the kitchen still had Sarah's teacup on the counter. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. There was no sign of struggle, no trace of where she might have gone, just an eerie silence. Sarah Miller was gone, and no one knew why. Days passed, but the mystery deepened. As the neighborhood residents tried to cope with Sarah's disappearance, something even stranger began to happen. Every night, at exactly 3 a.m., a strange sound echoed through the houses. Something between a whistle and a low hum. The first time it happened, it was faint, a distant whisper. But as the days went by, the sound grew louder, and each night more residents heard it. At first they thought it was just their imagination, but soon enough they couldn't ignore it any longer. The sound seemed to come from nowhere, but it was always at the same time. Some described it as a soft melody, while others claimed it was like a distant voice calling out. No matter what, it left an unsettling feeling in everyone who heard it, and worse, after each strange sound, another neighbor vanished without a trace. Mr. Green was the next to disappear. He was an elderly man who spent most of his days in his garden, growing flowers and vegetables. His house was one of the oldest in the neighborhood, and he had lived there for decades. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to twinkle, neighbors saw Mr. Green tending to his garden as usual. He waved to a few neighbors who passed by and went inside for the night. That night, the eerie sound was heard once again, but this time it was louder than ever. As the clock struck 3 a.m., the neighbors heard the hum and whistle echoing through the quiet street. But when they went to check on Mr. Green the next morning, his house was empty. The front door was wide open, his gardening tools still lying in the yard. But Mr. Green was gone. With each passing day, fear spread like wildfire. People were too afraid to leave their homes, and the once lively neighborhood was now filled with suspicion and anxiety. But when 2 more neighbors vanished, the remaining residents knew they had to act. Detective Claire Weston was called in. A seasoned investigator, she had seen her fair share of mysterious cases, but this one was different. Upon arriving, she interviewed the neighbors who had heard the strange sounds. They were terrified and couldn't explain what was happening. Some said it was a ghost. Others believed a killer was lurking in the shadows. Detective Claire was skeptical but determined. She set up surveillance cameras around the neighborhood, hoping to capture something, anything, that could explain the disappearances. Days passed, and the tension grew thicker. Then, on the night of the 5th disappearance, the cameras finally captured something. At exactly 3 a.m., the strange sound filled the air once again. But this time, the cameras picked up movement. A shadowy figure appeared on the footage. It was tall, thin, and moved swiftly through the neighborhood. The figure seemed to hover above the ground, never touching it. It seemed to hover above the ground, never touching it. The figure passed by each of the empty houses, stopping at one of them, then disappearing into thin air. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. The figure wasn't human. It wasn't a person at all. Determined to solve the case, Detective Claire dug deeper into the history of Willow Creek. She uncovered an old legend from the early 1900s. Long before the neighborhood was built, the land was home to an orphanage. A tragic fire broke out one fateful night, killing most of the children who lived there. But one boy, an unnamed orphan, survived. The boy, known only as the Whispering Boy, was never seen again. Some said he had run away, but others believed that he never left the land. The fire had taken everything from him: his family, his home, and his life. His spirit, restless and filled with anger, was said to haunt the area. Detective Claire connected the dots. The disappearances weren't random. They were happening at exactly 3 a.m. because that was when the boy had died in the fire. His spirit had returned, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared live on the land where he had suffered. On the night of the sixth disappearance, Detective Claire decided to confront the entity. She stayed awake, hiding in one of the vacant houses, armed with a camera and a flashlight. As the clock struck 3 a.m., the sound returned. This time it was louder than ever. Claire's heart raced as she heard the soft whistle, followed by a chilling hum. The temperature dropped and the air felt heavy. Suddenly the shadow appeared. It floated towards her, its form indistinct, like smoke swirling in the darkness. Claire's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary ghost. This was the Whispering Boy, his rage consuming him as he searched for more victims. Claire gathered every ounce of courage and spoke aloud. "I know what you want. You want peace. But taking innocent lives won't give it to you?" The figure stopped, hovering in front of her. For a brief moment, everything went silent. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. And Detective Claire was never seen again. The camera footage she left behind showed nothing more than a flicker of light before everything went dark. The neighborhood of Willow Creek is now abandoned, its streets empty and silent. The vanishing neighbors were never found, and the eerie sound still echoes through the empty houses at 3 a.m. Some say the Whispering Boy spirit is still out there, waiting for the next soul to claim. And if you ever find yourself in Willow Creek, remember to leave before the clock strikes 3, or you may just become part of the mystery.